Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am happy to be with you once again. It's Tuesday, it's interview day, and hope your week is going well so far. Hope you had a great weekend. I had a great weekend. I did very little. I did laundry. That's always exciting. I did laundry. Oh, you know what? No, I had a bit of a dramatic weekend, actually, now that I think about it. I had a migraine on Sunday, and then thankfully it wasn't a horrible one, but it wasn't great. And then I took the dogs out for a walk, and my little boy dog he's so nosy, and he always has to go stick his nose, literally in this case, where it doesn't belong. And so there was a dog barking at him, and the dog was sticking his nose under the gate, and my dog went to stick his nose under the gate, and the other dog nipped at him. My dog's okay, but hopefully this will teach him to not stick his nose in places where it doesn't belong. But he's a Chihuahua. They have that Napoleon complex where he thinks he can take every dog he meets, even though he's a snack. He is a teeny tiny snack. He weighs like 7 pounds, and he would be a gulp for any dog that thought they needed to, that he thought he needed a challenge. So I'm very grateful that did not go worse. I yanked him back as quickly as I could. He was on his leash, and thankfully the other dog was behind a gate, but that did not make my day happy, and it certainly did not help my head. So that was Saturday evening. Doesn't really, I think it was Saturday. Either way, it was a very dramatic weekend for me in that regard. Otherwise, it was fine. Dog is fine. Yeah, all is good. So anyway, books. I am interviewing Christian Carl today, who is the author of a series of children's books about a group of creatures called umlauts. You know that I love children's books. I love reading with children, and so I'm always excited when I get to have children's books authors on the podcast, which isn't as often as maybe I would like, but that's okay because I get lots of other great authors. At any rate, this is like I said, a series about creatures called the umlauts. The series itself is called Land of Lots. Let me give you the description of the first book, which is simply called Land of Lots. And then there's two more after that: Land of Lots Plan Gill, Land of Lots Plan Page. Welcome to the children's book series Land of Lots. In our very first book, Lovelot, a young girl wandering through space, lands in a strange and magical place called Land of Lots, where she meets and gets to know an adorable band of animals called umlauts. Question is, will she choose to stay or will she go? Hi, Christian. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. I'm really excited to be here. I know that myself and series co-creators Chuck and Sue Willis, as well as Joe Delia, our social media manager, we're really excited to have this opportunity to speak with GSMC book review. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to talk to you about this series of children's books. Before we do that, though, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself so my listeners can get to know you a bit.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a father of 3 kids, very proud father of 2 girls and a boy. My oldest daughter owns her own hair salon in Philly. My other daughter just started her freshman year at Oberlin. And then I've got my youngest, who's a boy, starting 2nd grade. So pretty good spread. And, through all the time I've been with them, I've been a professional writer in advertising, going on 32 years now. I'm currently an executive creative director for a global ad agency, and I, manage a really large group of copywriters, art directors, and designers. And, I've had the opportunity to work on some really fun and recognizable campaigns over the years. It's been a really, 32 years now. I got into the business because I swore I'd never wear a suit. And that's the thing I love most about my job is I can come as I am and be myself. And that's kind of rare in professional jobs to really kind of express yourself and be who you want to be. So I've really enjoyed every year I've been in that business. But I've never really let it define me as a creative person. It is a business. We are, doing work for other people and for their gain. And it's really not a selfish endeavor or any much of a personal endeavor. So I always thought, and, it would be good and positive for me in my career to find other ways, to express my creativity. And so I've always pursued outside interests. I had a business selling my artwork, doing murals for a time. So I've had kind of a life as an artist at one point. I made a record once, it's still on Spotify. I think I have 5 listeners. It was like back in 2006, but, I made a record, did a few shows, kind of did that and moved on. And then eventually started to find myself in this world of children's books and entertainment. It was something, that seemed like a next step for me. And, it is something now, as I've gotten further into, writing more of the books and really starting to experience getting to share this world with kids. I spent the summer, touring around this summer, reading to camps, to schools, to libraries. And the joy of that experience really, said to me that there's something out there that I eventually want to kind of put more of my time into and spend the tail end of my career as a writer doing so. But in a really strange way, I don't think I would have been ready for it any sooner. I think that everything I learned in advertising, how to build worlds, create characters, tell stories in a short form, those are all things that really, have informed my ability to, create this series and really do it in a way that I think has some longevity and some real timelessness. So that's just a little bit about me so far.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, the series is it's called Land of Lots. So can you give an overview of the series itself?
Yeah, absolutely. The basic storyline is that Love Lot, she's a young girl roaming through space till she lands in this strange and magical place called the Land of Lots. And this really is a metaphor for entering the world of parenthood. It's new, it's strange, it's exciting, it's also, difficult. And so there's that kind of subtext of her, entering this new world, which, is parenthood. And there she discovers the umlauts, which in many ways are just children, a band of adorable animal-like creatures. They all love to do something lots, and that's kind of the thing about them. So Cubby the bear, for example, likes to hug lots. Paige the cat likes to read lots. Rory the lion likes to roar lots. Gil the fish, well, he's always flapping his gills. He likes to talk lots, and so on. But with that comes a problem to solve. And that's where, Lovelock comes in. So Cubby needs to learn personal space. He's hugging all the time. Paige needs to learn to get her nose out of a book and experience the world around her. It touches a little bit on social anxiety and, being able to kind of communicate beyond, the world of books. My brother was very much like that growing up. And then, you've got Rory, who needs to learn his inside voice, or Gil, who needs to learn to listen a little more. So with all these things they love to do lots comes a problem to solve. And Lovelot basically, through practicing patience, and devising a plan, helps each one of them learn a valuable lesson, along with the other umlauts. So really this kind of idea of unconditional love, patience, and a plan is, a really interesting message for parents, who are reading the books.
Mm-hmm. What was your initial inspiration for the series? Did you start with maybe Lovelot, or did you start with that idea of like a metaphor for parenting? Where did you start?
Well, it's really interesting. And I've always believed that ideas, don't come to you. I think the key to being a creative person is that you look for ideas and everything. You don't kind of wait for them to show up. And I actually found inspiration for Land of Lots at IKEA, of all places. So I noticed
the name Land of Lost because you're in that
yeah, right. Yeah, well, I was lost somewhere in an aisle, and I saw this package of meatballs, and I think it was like Kootballer. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, but there was like the O with the two dots over the top, the umlaut, right? It's an umlaut or whatever. It's spelled differently than I'm spelling it in my book. But I just saw that and thought, well, that looks like a face. And when I stopped at the cafeteria to eat, after loading my cart with a lot of things I'll throw away, 3 months later, just kidding, IKEA, I love you. I actually started on drawing on a napkin a bunch of animal faces around this little O in the two dots. So I drew a bear, and then I drew like a cat, and then I drew, a lion. And I thought, well, this is pretty interesting. It's like a really simple organizing, principle for like designing a character. If I start here, I can pretty much design any animal I want. So I went home, really kind of excited about this thought of, creating all these characters, and I thought, well, what would I call them? I think I'll just call them umlauts, because inspired by the two dots. And then, from there, I was like, well, I drew out all the characters. I actually sketched for probably 20 different animals out. And then I was thinking to myself, what will I call these things? Well, maybe I'll just call them umlauts, but I'll spell it OOMLOTS because it's kind of fun. And then I was like, well, what's the point of umlauts? Like, why do I care? I was like, well, maybe they like to do things lots, and like, what's that? What's it mean if they like to do things lots? Well, it means that they might get carried away, and they might need to, that's actually a lot like children, they get carried away with things they like to do a lot, and they kind of don't know, that getting carried away can kind of get you into trouble, right? So I thought, well, they'll need someone like a parental figure of some kind. And I was a huge Winnie the Pooh fan. I loved A.A. Milne growing up. And I was like, who's my, Christopher Robin-like character? Like maybe they need someone like that to kind of, keep them in line. And I was like, well, what would her name be? And if it was a girl, maybe it's Lovelot. So I ended up with Lovelot. And then I just kind of went from there. Like, what should the world be like? Like, what should the world be called? Well, it should be Land of Lots, and so what's the Land of Lots look like? Oh, it's a planet, So I just literally started crafting this world from that one little meatball package at IKEA. It turned into a lot of characters, and a simple storyline of you can kind of get out of balance, like if you're doing something too much or you like it so much you don't know kind of where to draw the line. So so I was thinking like, what do they, they like to do things lots. I assigned them the traits, and then, created this world. And at that time, I had just kind of taken like all the different things that I kind of understood about children at the time, that some of the universal characteristics and traits, that they had. And, I kind of selected those things they like to do lots based on that. And it actually started in a really interesting way as a 7 to 12-year-old graphic novel series. That's how I was seeing the book. And there were actually two antagonists called Doomlot and Gloomlot, which is really funny. These brother-sister duo that were kind of antagonistic characters on the Land of Lots. And then I met Chuck and Sue around that time. I think I was in the middle of drawing like this 180-page graphic novel. And Chuck and Sue Willis, Chuck was an editor. I made a ton of commercials and I'd edit with Chuck all the time. And one day I just kind of told him all about this world I was creating called Land of Lots. And I showed him some stuff. And then, he showed Sue and, Sue really loved it. And it was really their suggestion to kind of scale it back and take it down from a 7 to 12-year-old graphic novel series to something more like ages 2 to 6. And it took a little convincing because I had invested probably 3 years or something at this time already, like in my spare time, kind of putting this world together and working on this book. But it made a lot of sense, because it felt like, it might be a simpler world to start with. And also what I really liked about it was the idea that, well, could this be a series that from 2 to 6 years old, yes, it's a children's book series, but can those 6-year-olds graduate to the 7 to 12-year-old graphic novel series? And can I actually create a 2 to 12-year-old series that basically has it basically evolves at the 7 to 12 age range? And they thought that was a really cool idea, and I do too, and we still do. And that actual graphic novel exists. I wrote and drew it by hand myself, and I'm not much of an artist, but I was able to manage to get that book done. So there is this really wonderful thought that once this 13-book series for kids is done, that we would then parlay it into a graphic novel series. But that's really how it all started. That's why the current book, for kids now has talk bubbles. It's a little bit of a natural transition into graphic novels with talk bubbles. So we wanted it to take on a bit of a comic book, type feel, but keep it really simple and easy to digest. And, there's a few other books out there, obviously quite popular, that use talk bubble style. It seemed to be, at the time I was looking at what else was out there, not something unusual. And so it felt like it was the way to go. But yeah, so the 7 to 12-year-old superpowers, and there's all sorts of magical stuff. Like it's really gets a little more psychedelic and kind of trippy and out there. And so we just kind of pulled all that back and really kept it to Lovelot and the characters, and that basic premise of kind of learning something, through really good guidance and love from your parents, basically.
Popping in so we could take our first break of the podcast, I was laughing a little bit, let me share, during Christian's introduction, because he was saying that he was very happy that he has a job that he doesn't have to wear a suit to every day. And I was just smiling because my husband loves suits. He would wear a suit to the grocery store just, on a Saturday morning if he doesn't, but he would feel comfortable with it. He loves suits. And so when I hear people talk about whether or not they love suits, it always makes me think of my husband. And we're not going to talk about how many suits he owns, but it's an impressive collection, and he looks good in them and he loves them. So let's go ahead and take our first break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking more about the illustrations in the book and how they evolved from those drawings on napkins into what they are now. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with author Christian Carl about his series of children's books, Land of Lots. Let's go ahead and return to that interview.
Now, you went from drawing characters on a napkin from the idea of the umlaut for the faces, and then you worked on drawing a graphic novel. How much of your drawings are in the books now, and how did that relationship work with you and the illustrators?
Yeah, well, I had created all the look and feel of the characters. I drew them all out. I drew the world out. I had this completed graphic novel where I had, basically drawn and created every element, even down to the spaceship. I have a whole sketchbook full of spaceship options, that I sketched through till I just went with that simple shape that she has in the book. But yeah, so when I obviously knew that my drawing was not to the level at which I wanted this book to take on. So I actually just went on a website, that promotes illustrators. And I looked through a bunch of illustrators and I found Joyce Fan, and I really liked her work. And I just sent her an email and said, hey, I'm working on this children's book. I've pretty much kind of figured out the world, but I need someone to, bring a level of professionalism and also bring their own their own thoughts and ideas to the table, and, to collaborate with me on the book. So Joyce was, surprisingly, I was really excited. I got an email back saying she was interested. And then, from that day forward, she took everything I had done and then did character sketches. We looked, she tried a bunch of different things, all based, off of what I originally had created. But, with her style, the way she, illustrates is really interesting. She's got a very specific look and feel. And so she and I just worked literally because she's in Portland. We've still never met, which is so funny. But we worked over the phone and through email for, 2 years, just going back and forth, trying to figure out the world exactly how we wanted it to be. And, it's relatively similar to where it started. Just what she brought to the table was just a lot of wonderful there's a lot of little Easter eggs in the book, a lot of little details. And, if you read some of the things that are in there that she added all of those simple things like the recipe and how it's written out. And, if you just kind of take enough time to look at every page, she's always got some little, surprise in there that, obviously I never would have been able to come up with. And she definitely elevated the books to a level that, we felt, we're ready to, hopefully share with the rest of the world. So it's been an incredible partnership with Joyce. She's really, super collaborative, really open to feedback, but also just brings things that, to the table that are like, oh, I never would have thought of that. And I think she's been an incredible reason the books so far are being so well received. They're just beautiful to look at, which was really important to me. I'm a huge graphic novel, fan, a huge fan of animation, illustration, and obviously being a creative director in advertising, I care about the quality of the things that I make and the level of professionalism that goes into the art of things and design of things. And she was a wonderful partner to help us make that happen.
Wonderful. So there's 3 books currently: Land of Lots, and then Land of Lots Plan Gil, and Land of Lots Plan Page.
Yep.
I'm assuming that each umlaut will get their own story. You said there's 13 umlauts, so will each of them get their own story?
Yes. Yeah. The idea is that, I actually Plan Foggy is being drawn as we speak, illustrated as we speak, and that'll be the next book in the series. I'm just about to finish up Plan Janie, and that'll go into illustration. And I have basically the basic storylines written for the rest of the characters. So that would be 13 books in all. But I'm also considering a 14th book that would be that transition into the graphic novel world. So once each of the umlauts kind of learns what they learn, I kind of look at the graphic novel series as that next stage in child development where, okay, your parents can't make decisions for you. They can't always be there to guide you. And now you've got some tools and wherewithal to make some of your own decisions. And so I think there's some interesting idea that, Lovelot kind of goes back to wherever she came from and kind of gets summoned maybe once in a while to come back and inspire them. But they're more so a little bit like a 7 to 12-year-old be where some of these situations you might face, and especially with, antagonistic characters brought into the mix, you've got to learn how to kind of face some of those things on your own and solve your own problems. And obviously the first 13 books were there to kind of set the, to kind of like prepare them for that next level of childhood. So I'm really thinking about it in a way that, these are stages in childhood and stages in parenting at the same time. You've got to kind of back off and let them solve some of their own problems at some point. But you're there to remind them and inspire them that they have that power within them to solve those problems.
So within the series then, or somewhere in there, will readers get to know more about Lovelot and her past, or is she kind of just a bit of a mystery?
It's interesting because she's a bit of a mystery so far, but as I write, more books in the series, I feel like what I'm starting to do now is throw in some Easter eggs here and there because I kind of understand where it's going next in that 7 to 12-year-old world. And so I really like the idea as I continue to get closer, as the books continue to expose a little bit more of that. Like there are little dots on Lovelot's shirt, which you don't really understand why they're there, but you will later. There's some things that are there already that you don't know. I was kind of thinking that 14th book would be somewhat of a Lovelot story in the sense she's the only one that hasn't had hers yet. And through her kind of, going back home, we might learn about where she came from. So I'm in many ways looking at that 14th book as kind of the Lovelot story. But I do think there will be moments as I continue to write more of these where, little things here and there are revealed. What's really exciting about writing the books is, I can't just write every book with the exact same formula. I think like these first 2 books follow a pretty similar thing. The third book starts to open the world up. They, not to give too much away, but they might actually get in Lovelot's spaceship in this next book, and then pieces of the world are going to unfold, and I think it's going to become more and more magical and more evident. So I'm hoping that every time someone gets a new one, something new is discovered, that, these first 2 kind of set the tone. But as we continue, I think that there needs to be surprise and some delight and some newness to every story that you didn't know before. So it's just kind of fun to watch it unfold as I write each book, and that I really can do whatever I want with it. It's a world that I can kind of just decide what I want to happen next, which is really kind of fun. And I can take some chances maybe. And I've got Chuck and Sue who are great at, kind of, giving me different perspectives, and really, helping guide, the process. And, they've taken a great interest in in the stories and have been great contributors, along the way to, the stories themselves. And so, yeah, I think it's just, who knows, which is what's kind of fun about it. But yeah, all those things, I guess, remain to be seen, but I would imagine we'd want to hear a little bit more about Lovelot and her, her background. And the graphic novel actually gives a lot of that away, but no one's seen that yet, obviously. So.
Right. Well, and as an adult reading the books, if you're a parent reading them with your children, as an adult reading the books, I'm thinking, why is this young woman roaming around space by herself? Where's her planet? What is going on here?
True. Yeah, it really just started out as like we're all as parents kind of roaming around through space doing whatever we want, kind of willy-nilly, and then we have kids and everything changes, so that's really as far as it goes. And I don't really even explain that, but that notion is just we are these kind of freer spirits in a way, and then we kind of don't maybe understand what we got ourselves into as new parents. It's a wonderful thing, but it's also pretty challenging, and like it's not like you can just pick up and fly to the next planet. You're kind of there, and you're there for the long haul. And that's what's really interesting about the first book, I think, is, she gets kind of put through the ringer by all the umlauts. They're young, rambunctious little creatures that kind of tire her out, and she goes back to that ship kind of dreaming about what life in space used to be, but obviously you just love your kids so much. Like there's obviously no choice but to stay and to do what you can to help them grow up to be, great people, so. But yeah, there is that subtext of this, so you're giving up a little, and you're gaining a lot, right? Gaining lots, actually. So I think that's really in a way her story. She's given up that freedom, but gained lots and lots of love,
Yeah. What do you hope that readers, both parents and children, might take away from the series?
Well, I think the overarching theme is really, in its broadest sense, acceptance, and maybe even self-acceptance, and also just, inclusivity, but I think more specifically, the lessons learned in these books are twofold. It's a series meant for new parents, whatever their age, and they're, for their kids to learn together. I think parents learn the importance of unconditional love, of this having patience. I mean, patience is the number one thing, that most parents need to learn. I mean, by the time I had my third child, nothing fazed me, right? Like, but, having the ability to take a breath and go, these are children, they've got things to learn and it's my job to teach them. There's that patience, and also just a plan. Like you can't just say, quit talking so much, or, I wish you weren't so loud. You need to be quiet. Like we need to show by example. We need to kind of show them how, and show them the results of what happens when they do those things, and do kind of understand, when it's time to be loud or when it's time to be quiet, because, just they need more than just being told what to or not to do, and I think that's something that is, hopefully taken out of the book, is this notion of, having patience, having some thought behind how you work with, talk to, and help nurture your kids. And then for the kids, I think, they are these universal themes I saw across, 3 decades of raising my kids. that by nature they are loud, they can be selfish, they can be impetuous, they can be clingy and all these things, but they're also incredibly loving. I mean, they just love you, like unconditionally, and we've got to know how to return that same love to them. But I think, that kids really get to see themselves, in these characters. It's very comforting, I think, for parents and kids, and also just kind of funny to kind of see these traits in the umlauts and go, oh, that's my Sam, or that's my Jordan. That happens all the time when I talk to parents or when I'm reading the books. I'll be like, Cubby likes to hug lots. And you're like, some parents pointing at her kid going, here's the hugger right here, like, I think that's really the coolest thing about the book in many ways is people just immediately identify with, that their child, or even as a teacher, that their student, oh, that's, that is that kid and that is that kid. And, all of the kids raise their hand and say that they're like certain umlauts. I open the back of the book and they all run up and point at the one they love, the one that's the most like them. And I think it's like this really interesting way of saying it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to hug lots. It's okay to roar lots. It's okay to be those things, because, we're here all together to kind of accept each other and get better. So, yeah, I think that, that idea of just it's okay to be who you are, universal kind of acceptance and inclusivity, but if you go one step deeper, it's just, hey, that's me, and I kind of like that, I'm not alone, that there are other people like me.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and take our second break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking a little bit more about the next couple of books in the series, when they might be coming out, and more. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with Christian Carl. We are talking about his series of children's books, Land of Lots. Let's return to the interview.
You mentioned working on the next couple of books in the series. Do you have an estimate on when those will be out?
I think Plan Foggy, we're aiming for next year, I think probably towards the end of next year. We definitely took some time getting 3 books ready because we wanted to put them out in a way that felt like this is, legitimate and real and a series. I think the other books will probably fold in, maybe hopefully Plan Foggy, probably mid next year, I would think is what we're looking at. And then, the others will probably stagger 2 or 3 again. Like I don't obviously can't take 13 years for all of the books to come out, or 7, I guess, 11 more years. But, I think over the next 3 or 4, we'd like to have them all released. But that's kind of a moving plan, but I think that's where we're at right now. Plan Janie should start, really soon, as far as illustrations on that. And, we may hold off and decide to do 3 more. That's something we've talked about as well. And just to kind of, since there are, we did launch the first 3 together, maybe it might be fun to kind of have each wave have multiple books.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned writing throughout in various capacities throughout your life and your career. Is writing for publication something that you kind of always had in the back of your head, or did that then just come about kind of with the inspiration for this series?
Oh no, it's something I always wanted. I always wanted to do. And I grew up on cartoons, and I grew up on animation. It's really interesting. I think I was more inspired as a writer by music and television and commercials than I was books. Not that I don't love books, but I was a visual. I've always been a very visual writer. Someone who would rather look through a book of artwork, than maybe read a novel. But at the same time, paying a lot of attention to how stories are told. I was actually more interested in creating a world, like that's what I always wanted to do. And I found myself doing that in advertising. I used to work on like The Most Interesting Man in the World for Dos Equis, where we created this, ridiculous world for this old guy who, didn't like beer, but like, and more as I worked in my career, I was creating these worlds and characters. And I think that's when I really thought, like, I'm already doing this and I know how to do it. And why don't I do it in a capacity where my name is at the end instead of a brand's name? Because, I've done this. There are a lot of people, whose voices are actually mine, but no one knows. You're like a ghostwriter for all these brands because their logos at the end of it. No one really knows who's writing that stuff. So I think I always was doing it, but I was never doing it in a capacity where, it was property of me, and that's about, when I started this book, I was in that mindset of, wow, I keep doing all these things that are really interesting that everyone's talking about, and that, are entertaining people and quite popular. But they're not mine. I don't own them. They're not my property. They don't belong to me. And it feels like a shame that I'm able to do this and not, do it to create, my own story, So I think, my head was probably there when I was at that IKEA and I was looking for something, to call my own or to make my own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, I think, what led me to it. It's interesting. I was really just trying to, in my early years, take care of myself financially and take care of my kids. And, I was really not, and doing my job and, not really thinking super clearly about where I was going to go creatively as an individual. I just kind of jumped right into the world of advertising and got swept up in it and, started family and, just was, providing and earning and, doing what I needed to do, to take care of everybody. So I think it was just a transitioning thought one day of, I keep doing this for everybody else. Why don't I do it for me?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have, from your own experience, do you have advice for authors who maybe are thinking about writing children's books or graphic novels or anything along those lines?
This is a tough one. People are, motivated in different ways, I guess. But my advice really is just to write a lot. Like, I don't think, writers really, not all writers that I've come across, even professionally, I mentor a lot of writers, really understand like the work it takes, to really find the right words. I mean, I literally write as many words as I can till the only words left are the right ones. Like that's how I write, I overwrite everything. And in that overwriting, I make little discoveries. I just keep going. Like if I write, even in my job, if I were to write one headline, I'm going to write that 100 different ways till I find the perfect way to say it that's the most interesting. Like, and you've got to just have that natural curiosity and kind of like willingness to go there and really put the time in to be good at it, to really find the right words. And it's a really arduous road. I kind of equate it to being an archaeologist in the sense that, there's a lot of unsuccessful digs. You're digging, but you just got to keep digging till you find something. And, it's those that quit too soon, or think they found it because, they're done that I don't think, are ever going to quite get there. It's really, you got to keep digging till you find that beautiful thing that's been hidden and buried somewhere that you had to uncover through your efforts, and then you got to polish it up, care for it, shine it up, represent it to the world. And I've always thought of writing as digging up fossils and, taking the care to polish them. And, because I don't think any ideas out there don't already exist or haven't existed for quite a long time. It's just the willingness to find them and to write as many words as you can till you do. And I also think a really big key to my success has been really not being afraid to ask anybody, who would even care to listen, what they think about what it is that I'm doing. I mean, I mean, half of my intelligence comes from conversations from other people smarter than me, like that's really important. I think even in my profession, the writers that succeed are the ones that come to me and go, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Do you think this would work? Or do you think that would work? They don't wait around, hide it and kind of wait till the last second to share it. They're constantly, engaging people in it, and I'm sure there are some writers that are quite private about what they're writing and maybe they don't do that as much. But I think growing up in advertising as a writer, you survive by picking everybody else's brain, on what it is you're doing and what they think. And you can be able to take all of that and make your own decision. But it's amazing what people will be able to give you if you just ask, and a lot of times it's just, the answers lie in not pretending that they're up to you to know, and to really be curious enough to ask. And then the third thing I would say is you just got to finish it. Yes, I'm saying take your time, like do what's necessary. Don't quit too soon, but also don't be afraid to complete something. Like this is a really big struggle. It is for me, at least. Like, what's wonderful about advertising is there's a deadline and I have to be finished with it because it has to be on air and it has to be done. There are deadlines and dates and, media buys, and you can't mess around. And every time I finish something, I think of the 50 things I wish I would have thought of when it's out there, but you can't, you kind of got to give yourself in some ways that kind of discipline as a writer, a timeline, a time frame, like, because the only difference between you possibly and someone who has a book on the shelf is that they just finished it. You might see books on the shelf that some might be better than others to you, or you might have an idea that you want yours to be the best, but I think you're never going to get there if you just don't finish something. And, I think a lot of times writers have trouble knowing when to stop because they're just, a little bit afraid to put it out there, and be done with it. Because there is a little bit of a sadness when you finish something, right, that you've been so invested in. It happens every time I finish a project. There's a little bit of a lull in you that says like, oh, all of that energy and time, oh, now it's over. My baby's out there. But you got to be willing to put it out there. And so really being, having the discipline to set a time frame and be okay with something being finished but not perfect, to start the process, because you've got editors, publishing, got all these other people that are going to have an opinion, so the sooner you get it in their hands, the better, like you could spend another year making it perfect and it wouldn't matter anyway, because it's going to change again. So I think that's something, really important, is just finishing,
Yeah, absolutely.
having the
Because
courage
it's never
to complete.
going to be perfect,
No, it isn't, That's why I love painting and I love making music, because I'm not supposed to be good at it. And when I finish a painting, I'm like, I'm done. That's awesome. Next painting, But when I write a book, I'm like, they just suffer, you suffer over every word, and it is, it's like, it's so much more, I'm so much more expected to be good at that it's really hard for me to sometimes stop or let go or know when to quit, So,
Right.
yeah. And that is the joy I find in painting. If I paint anything, I think it's awesome, like I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did that. And
That's great.
I think all writers should probably find something like that they can easily be happy about. That's creative other than writing. That could be a fourth piece of advice. Just find something you can be, easily pleased over, because writing will never be that, for you.
Sure.
And time for our final break of the podcast. When we come back, Christian will be talking about some of his favorite books that he has read throughout the years with his own children. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author Christian Carl.
Your kids are various ages, so you've been reading with them for a few decades now. What are some of the favorite books that you've read with your children?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, Winnie the Pooh's always been a classic, because it was for me. I always, made sure they had, some Winnie the Pooh in their lives. I obviously they're so different because the ages were so different, right? So there was I Harold and the Purple Crayon was a classic that I grew up with, that I shared with my kids, by Crockett Johnson. The Snowy Day was a book I made sure that all of my kids had read, by Ezra Jack Keats. I think, obviously, all the Don't Let the Pigeon Do This and That, like that was huge for my current 18-year-old when she was little. That was like a big one for her. I've always kind of leaned towards the fantastical and funny. It's and so have my kids in many ways. I think it's funny because I can almost talk more about, almost entertainment that they watched as well, that was really interesting. But I mean, I read to my kids every night. I'm trying to think of some other books that were really instrumental in raising them. I know that, as they got a little older, a lot of them got into C.S. Lewis, and that world, and obviously Tolkien, got into, loving all of those books as they got older. Oh, the books that I love most reading right now to my son. I don't know if this author, but Shinsuke Yoshitake. Have you ever read any of his books? They're really, I think he's just a league all unto himself. I think they're,
What are some of the titles? The name sounds familiar.
yeah, one is called I Can Be Anything. One is called like the Boring Book.
Okay.
Um, yeah, he's a, and just incredible. Obviously, he illustrates and writes the books. It just, they are to me the most just clever, creative, funny, delightful children's books. Like for me, my favorite out there today, for that 2 to 6 age group. Um, just I can't even describe them. They're just so simple and sweet and wonderful, and you know, laugh out loud sometimes, but just really powerful in their simplicity, and really take on a lot of like subject matter in ways that are just really unique. Like being bored. Like to take the idea. Every kid goes through "I'm bored" phase. Like my son's like bored. I'm bored. I'm bored.
No, that's
So
boring. No, that's
yeah,
boring.
that's boring. That's boring. So, the Boring Book is amazing. It's just like, it just hits that right on the head. So I just think he's brilliant. So that would be like my number one recommendation to anybody looking for a new book, for their kids.
Okay.
Um,
Let's talk about internet presence. So website, social media. I know the books have a YouTube channel, which is awesome. Can you share some of the places that people can learn more?
Yeah, so we have Instagram, which is, just at Land of Lots, so you can learn more there. We even have a section for teachers. There are worksheets, available. I think we're actually in the curriculum, starting in the curriculum of I think it's 6 Long Island schools. So there's a real educational aspect to the books that are starting to kind of shine through, which we knew they were touching on really easy lessons to teach kids, but the world of education, teachers and specifically, are really gravitating to the books. So you can go to at Land of Lots on Instagram. You can go to our Land of Lots obviously webpage. And then we have YouTube page with the books there as well. And then also all sorts of influencers have been reading the books, either in their own podcasts or on their YouTube channels. And so there's a ton of really interesting takes on the book by different educators and people who are really into the world of children's books and trying to share what books are out there with other people. So those Instagram, YouTube, and our website are really the main sources right now for information on the books. And then yeah, that's it. I know we are actually starting a TikTok. We're going to start a TikTok soon. I've actually we've animated a couple of the characters, and we've got them a TikTok presence ready for the umlauts, which we're super excited about. That will be debuting in the next month or so, I think. So we're super excited to kind of get on that, to get on TikTok, and to kind of I think we're going to surprise some people with some fun stuff there that you don't usually see from children's book characters. So that's another exciting little thing that we've got brewing.
Fun. That sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
Christian, we've talked about the books and we've talked about a variety of different things, but is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to bring up or highlight at this time?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's one thing that I think is really, that I think I'd love to talk about, the fact that we see these, as much bigger than children's books. This is just the beginning of something to kind of, create a base. The tip of the iceberg is how we see the children's books. We really, our dream is really to make it an animated series, but what might not be super obvious to someone reading the books is it's really been thought out in a lot of different ways. So, for example, beyond an animated series, I see this as a toy company. I see this as a gaming company. I see Land of Lots as a educational curriculum, one that's like actually an official, kind of learning kit. And for example, uh, if you think about all the characters, they were all intentionally created to do all those things eventually. Like this world is massive. So, Cubby likes to hug lots. Well, Cubby's going to be the face of, plushies, and, Penny likes to knit lots. Well, I think Penny needs to create some really great crafting kits for kids, and that, Bucky likes to build lots. And so, what kind of building toys can Bucky invent and create for children? Janie likes to explore lots, butterfly nets, binoculars, magnifying glasses. Like there's a whole kind of organizing principle beyond just the lessons they learn, that really open this world up to being, nothing different than a Sanrio was, or a Pokemon, or, another bigger kind of children's franchise, So I think that's something that not a lot of people know or understand, but we've got just, really big, massive plans, and the logic is all there. Like I built the world in order for it to work that way. So there are just layers upon layers of opportunity and possibility with Land of Lots. And that's, I think, what's so exciting to myself, Chuck, Sue, and Joe is this is really just the beginning. And I think a lot of my experience in creating animation and creating storytelling and creating actual products, like I've done this in my career, will really, help as we move forward in that. And then you've got Chuck and Sue, who are, editors, writers, creative visionaries themselves. That I think we have a lot more, I think, behind us, than just, myself and an illustrator. We have just, Joyce also being a designer, for Nike in Portland. We've got some experience, in marketing, some experience in design, some experience in film production that I think is going to, really help us as we move forward and hopefully as this series expands.
That's really wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And it's exciting, all the directions that it could possibly go. So
yeah, it's really a world, like one of those bigger worlds, that can invite you in and kind of become part of your own when you leave. And that's what's so exciting. I always say that make believe makes believers. And I actually did a speech at South by Southwest called World Building: The Power of Fictional Realities, just this past spring. And that you can Google my name on YouTube, World Building Christian Carl, and check out. But it's an insight into kind of how worlds are built and, what the value of them are and how they connect with people. So it's interesting. If you want to check that out, you should, Sarah. It's kind of like 30 years of knowledge that I've gained in my career, kind of coming to fruition, and an idea that really, inspired and has informed the way I approached Land of Lots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you for that. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about the series and writing and just everything. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Thank you once again to Christian for joining me to talk about Land of Lots. Land of Lots first book, and then second and third books are Land of Lots Plan Gil and Land of Lots Plan Page. If you have little ones in the 2 to 6 year old age range, you might want to check out this series. There are 3 out currently, but there will be at least 13, possibly that 14th book. And then if your kids and you love them, you might want to transition up into that not middle grade, but the 7 to 12-year-old age range for that graphic novel that is coming out hopefully sometime in the future. So definitely check this out if you are interested. Appreciate Christian's thoughtfulness into the detail and the planning that went into this series. I mean, it started with an umlaut, which is 2 dots at IKEA, and grew into this whole idea of a whole world and different learning styles and and parenting ideas and ways to interact with children. I mean, it's just amazing to me sometimes how people's brains work, and this is one of those occasions where I'm impressed with the level of detail that went into all of the phases of this series coming together to be what it currently is and what it may eventually be sometime in the future. So thank you to Christian for that. Thank you, as always, to you for joining me for this episode. I hope you will come back for the next interview. I have another returning author. This time, Kevin Moore will be returning to talk about his book, Book of Demons. It is the follow-up to his book, The Book of Souls, which he talked about on our first interview together. It's the perfect time of year for this book because it is September, which means we're getting closer to October, and people kind of go September, time for Halloween, and this is in the horror genre. But as listeners to this podcast know, I'm not the bravest, so if I can read horror, anybody can read horror. And so this is it's creepy, and it's definitely good for spooky season, but it did not give me the night, it didn't keep me awake, which is good. So looking forward to talking to Kevin about the second book in this series, and again, that one's called The Book of Demons, so please join me for that. As always, if you are a fan of this podcast and have the time and the inclination, please do leave us a review, written or starred. Also, take a second to follow, like, subscribe, whatever platform you listen to the podcast on. That way you can get updates whenever there's a new episode that comes out. And also follow on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I always say it, but it's true. Love hearing from you. So if you want to interact with me on social media, I would love hearing from you, hearing what you're reading, answering questions, whatever your mood is when you are on social media. If you want to leave a comment or a question, I would love to hear it. Hope you're having a great day. And as always, I hope that your week goes really, really well with plenty of time for you to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.